Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Two Average Joes. I'm Joseph St. John. Have about 30 years of law enforcement. Spent time at the Newport News Police Department, going to the rank of captain, and spent time in Columbus, Mississippi as the chief. Got a good experience of doing a little bit of everything. That's one of the nice things about being promoted. You get to be involved in a lot of different things. So I even spent a little bit of time being in charge of our homicide unit in Newport News. So I still got a lot of time to see a lot of things and get involved in things. Mr. Baker, a little background on you.
I'm a licensed attorney practicing in Michigan, primarily doing criminal law. I have touched some of one of the main cases in this, the third victim. Well, we're on the second victim now, but the third victim, Jane Spencer, I had a relationship with the convicted person, the person that was convicted of her murder, which will go a lot into probably the next episode. I believe she's next in a batter's box.
Yes.
I have a lot of experience in courts, appeals all the way to the Michigan Supreme Court. I've done circuit work. I haven't got to the Supreme Court yet, but I'm working towards that. The United States. I am working on that, but a few high profile cases. You could look me up. You'll find my smiling face talking trash.
Every now and then. Dealing with a lot of high profile crazy stuff happening there in the beautiful and sovereign state of Michigan.
We do that.
We're going to talk today. We're going to do our postscript and talk about Joan Schell. And she was the second victim. That's where I got a little confused. Of basically John Norman Collins. And we're going to talk a little bit more about her. For those that did not see the first episode that's going to be on Miss Schell, I will have down below, there'll be a video link so you can catch up on that one too. Just to give you a brief overview on this is where anybody looking at this case, when you start seeing the number of people that are involved and have their hands on it, both criminally and from the law enforcement side, you begin to see where the breakdown is going to occur. Okay. Yeah. Give us a little bit on that, because I know you found and talked about a few things today.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to go through three different areas. One is the military aspect of what was going on, because it touches on that. The Vietnam War was raging at the time. The Tet Offensive was going on from January to September. This happened right in the middle of the Tet Offensive. The victim's boyfriend or fiance, if you want to call him that, was AWOL from the Army, probably because he did not want to be in Vietnam,
right?
In the shooting war that was going on. And that was very tense. And we had said it in our very first episode regarding this, when we tried to set it up about Walter Cronkite after, I believe, the Tet Offensive or during it. Mm-hmm. He said that this war was basically unwinnable. But so Miss Schell's boyfriend or fiance was on the lam. He was AWOL. She was trying to get to him. So I just wanted to set that up as to also another thing that's threading through these cases, and you'll see it almost in every aspect, is John Norman Collins. He first comes to the police's attention in this case, but also this fraternity that he was in. Phi Beta, whatever the heck it was. And it plays into this a lot, because there was three young people in a red car with, there's conflicting stories of whether it was a convertible or a hardtop, vinyl hardtop, but there was three people in that car, three young people that were in that car, and one or both of them were in the fraternity with John Norman Collins. So you're going to see that threaded throughout all of this. Yeah, we were talking about during our post show that John Norman Collins was a police buff, and the first victim worked at the field house of EMU. The second victim worked at the field house of EMU, but the second victim, her body was placed in the city of Ann Arbor's jurisdiction and just within the jurisdictional limits of it. And I think that's important. I think we may have said it in that last episode, but what I wanted Joe to elucidate is of how police agencies cooperated back in 1968, if you know, but you know how they cooperate or lack thereof now. So we could talk about that.
I think when you get into multi-jurisdictional things, I think it's very easy to go, we had a task force. And I know they put the task force together or something. Okay.
Not yet, but they do.
But you know that we have this magical task force. And you have to have it because the jurisdictional stuff becomes a nightmare. And I don't want to get lost on other cases, but you have seen it in mass shootings where you've had jurisdictional problems. You've had problems with people trying to work with other agencies. And to be honest with you, they're not even on the same radio frequency and don't have the ability to be. Okay. You have jurisdictions that butt up to each other that don't even talk to each other. Okay. So multi-jurisdictional problems are nothing new. They probably weren't new then. They weren't new there. Don't want to get lost on J. Edgar Hoover, but that's why you actually started the FBI school. You want to try to bring this whole thing together. You know, depending on how you want to look at JFK, you can say that was sinister or not, but that's another topic for another time. These things have always been a problem. Bringing people together is a problem. And I think that in a case like this, where my guess is when they started realizing that they had a problem and this is going to be unusual. And let me stop everybody there. Most murders are not unusual. Most murders, people know who killed them. Most murders, we know who killed them. Most murders, everybody in the neighborhood knows who killed them. Okay? The average murder is not a whodunit, it's when can we get them. Okay? So we need to clarify that. You can say, well, they had murders before. Understand, most murders are not a whodunit. Most murders are as when can we find these people? Okay? It goes from everything from being a family member, a loved one, somebody who's having a beef with somebody got mad at somebody, a shooting that occurred with by people there and there's witnesses. Most murders are not, let me repeat that, not a whodunit. So when we sit there and go, we now have 2 murders in an area with these co-eds, and they are both whodunit. Okay, you've changed every bit of the rules. So you have the multi-jurisdictional problems where you're bringing people in and who's in charge. Here's the weird thing. She gets picked up. She's one place. She's dropped off. She's another place. Where's the actual crime scene? We don't know.
Yeah.
Who's going to take claim of this murder? Depends. And so you're pulling all of these things together. And it gets clarified to me on this one. And I said it in the last episode. This is where everything starts to fall apart. Okay, this quickly in the game. So, you know, whether or not you think it's 5 other women, 6 other women, or for people who allude that it could be as many as 20 or 30, this is where it falls apart.
Yeah, well,
and I think that multi-jurisdictional things are, you're collecting evidence and are you even talking?
That's it. And that comes into play because they eventually, John Norman Collins comes into focus as a prime suspect. And I'll get to that. But first, let me say that, okay, so the first victim was killed approximately 1 year prior. So this is almost on the anniversary date. Okay, so that should be suspect, right? That would at least, should any policeman or investigator would go, right? And then, so the first victim worked at the field house at EMU. The second victim worked at the field house of EMU.
And EMU being Eastern Michigan University.
Eastern Michigan University. Okay, so the investigation, to my knowledge, was going on, being investigated by at least the Eastern Michigan University campus police.
Yes.
Which evidently had a high level of training, because I had met with Officer Matthewson, I believe it was in 2014 or 15, and he was well versed in everything. And he's throughout the books that are written about this. He's all through it. So Eastern Michigan University campus, for obvious reasons, is investigating it because that's where both victims disappeared from. Right. Secondarily, the Ypsilanti police are looking into it because that's the jurisdiction that they're in. And then third is, at least as to this victim, then the Ann Arbor City police are looking at this.
Right.
So John Norman Collins comes into focus because he's talking about this specific murder in specific terms as to the brutality of it to a coworker at the field house where the other two victims were. And she tells the higher ups that she is distraught over this and eventually goes to a psychologist and gets prescribed medicine to tamp her anxiety down from hearing all of this. So they talk to John Norman Collins. John Norman Collins gives an alibi. He says, I was in Centerline, Michigan with my mother the whole time. I wasn't here at all. I didn't know that woman. And, but there was eyewitness testimony putting her, that he was the last person seen with her alive at about 30 to 45 minutes prior to her death.
Now, were they walking?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
They were seen walking.
They were seen walking, and they were seen walking by a fraternity brother who eventually went into the military and became an officer. Okay. At the time of the murder in 1968, he played down whether or not it was him. First, he said, yeah, it was him. And then he had another Marine with him that was a Marine on leave. And he also had a girlfriend with him. Mm-hmm. And they all pointed out and said, yep, it was John Norman Collins, right? Yeah. But for whatever reason, these alibis were never checked. And I suspect, and this is just, me blind ass thought, is because this multi-jurisdictional thing, maybe thinking that they all were. And then secondarily, which Joe and I had talked about, we went through the whole rank system of somebody being a corporal. John Norman Collins' uncle was a corporal in the Michigan State Police. And could you talk about that a little bit, about the command structure and whether that would give him credibility or anything?
Yeah, he has credibility. I'm the state police. When you get promoted, you are beginning to be part of the, for no better term, the command structure. Okay, or for put in perspective, kind of a management perspective. You're making calls. You're judging people. You're controlling people's careers and lives and how things are being done on there. So yeah, he does definitely have clout. And when we started talking about this particular case, what would be probably a couple of years ago, actually.
Yeah.
I believe that one of the reasons this starts to come undone is the multi-jurisdictional problem. Mm-hmm. I also think there is, and we talked about it in the last episode, I think that he got a free pass because of who his uncle was. And as we go through and build this, you're going to just see it over and over and over again, two things that just should have never happened.
Yeah.
So, we have there. I think that one of the things that occurred, because this was unlike most murders, this was a whodunit. Okay. I think there's a level of brutality, and you've read more than I have, but I've read plenty. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that either one of these jurisdictions that was something that they were prepared for.
Yeah.
Because it's an emotional thing too. If you're working in an area where you have 50 murders a year, 100 murders a year, and you see all sorts of different kind of violence, and you're up against who did it all the time, mm-hmm. That's one thing. Okay. But if you are not experienced with that, and that's not insult, because you can't do what you haven't been given an opportunity to do. Mm-hmm. So a lack of experience is not an insult.
Right.
You can't do what you haven't been given an opportunity to do. Okay. Yeah. That too, trying to put that together where you probably had them when they were together trying to piece things together. But when they were apart, there was probably times where they were just trying to wrap their head around the magnitude of what they had. Mm-hmm. Because in both of these cases, these are murders with extreme violence.
Yeah, I wanted to go into that, but I also wanted to say before we get off of that subject is that, so the first murder victim was walking through a neighborhood just because it was hot in her house and a car pulled up and she got into that car, or she got snatched, one or the other. Okay. And Joe and I had surmised or guessed there could be more than one person involved.
Yes.
Maybe in the first one, maybe not. All right. John Norman Collins at the time was living in a fraternity house about 0.2 of a mile from that victim. Okay. So already that fraternity house and him are in play, just for lack of a better word. All right. He gets thrown out of that fraternity house for stealing motorcycles and other things from other members of that fraternity. All right. And it's eventually found out that he is running basically a burglary ring eventually when he gets convicted of the final one. And he is storing stolen stuff at this corporal's house.
Right.
So,
yeah. So it's not like he's, trying to hide that. I want to show something here, share here. This is off our Two Avg Joe website. I want to show everybody Collins again. And this is a very good picture of him being arrested, okay?
mm-hmm.
One of the things I want to point out, because a lot of times we do it, you have to be careful. We did it last episode. We said there's going to be people that look at this guy and go, I don't think he did. Got a fine haircut or whatever you want to call it, because people make these judgments on what a murderer is going to look like. Don't do that. We don't know what a murderer looks like, okay? But there is something about John's picture that I think is very, very interesting. This is off our website. He's a big fella, okay? And I think you need to keep that in mind, that he is a big athletic person. And later on in some other issues, we're going to go into a little bit more about him, so I don't want to get ahead of that. But if you look at him, you can see he's an athletic guy. He played football. And he played football at a high level. Okay. So he's a big guy. So if he gets you, he's got you.
And he was a bodybuilder too, right?
Yeah.
Before bodybuilding.
Actually, I think that might be, and again, this is on the Two Avg Joe website, so you can see the link there, but it'll be in the, obviously in the body of here. But yeah, he was a bodybuilder, and he was a bodybuilder before bodybuilding was a popular thing.
Yeah.
He would have been into lifting and creating a physique long before anybody knew who Arnold Schwarzenegger was. And for younger people, believe it or not, before Arnold, that wasn't all that popular.
Yeah, right.
So we don't know, we don't want to put in all, too much speculative stuff, but that's not speculative. He's a big fella. He's into bodybuilding, and we'll get some pictures of that later.
That segues into pretty nicely the brutality of the murder. Okay. Right. In this specific case, the other one was 30 stab wounds. And she had, one of her hands were missing and two of her feet.
And some fingers off the other hand.
That's the first murder. So that's pretty brutal. And I don't know if you've ever tried to cut bone on a chicken or
right.
or anything, but it's very difficult and demanding physically to do that. So the second murder, she was stabbed 3 times in her back through her clothing. And then she was stabbed 22 times, I believe it was, in her front. Okay. And once in her skull, which may or may not have been the death blow, and then through her lungs, through her liver. And this was a brutal, vicious killing that took some strength to do, right?
I think there is times where they'll talk about the killer, but they will not discuss his physicalness.
Gotcha.
His aggressiveness is obviously there, but this is a guy that can be physical. This is a guy that is physical. This is a guy who has been physical his whole life. And in Collins' case, and that's why I showed the picture, is to understand that this was a big guy. And he was definitely, if given the opportunity, he was going to be able to handle somebody.
Right. I know where I was heading. So there was sperm found in her vagina. Okay. So in Earl James's book, he thinks that it may have been post-mortem.
Yeah.
Because of the stab wounds in the back. And I wanted your take on that.
Yeah, I don't think that would be unusual or be, there's a frenzy. Sometimes people go, why did they stab them 50 times? Well, because they don't die. Now they'll go, well, the autopsy said the first 2 stabs would have killed them. But you don't die like that. Okay. That's not the
No, your heart still beats. Your heart still beats. You still
and
move.
you're still moving.
Yep.
Okay. As a matter of fact, there's an FBI shooting where they got in shooting with some bad guys, and actually they shot the bad guy, and he would have eventually died from his wounds. However, I think he killed 2 FBI agents. It was 1 or 2 FBI agents after what would have been a kill shot. Okay, so the term "they would have died" that's a very broad situation. Okay, now, without being grotesque or going into something that I do not know factually, somebody having sex with somebody after they passed away, that isn't an unusual thing either. So
I believe that was also in the first murder too, right?
Yeah, the first murder, they don't know if she was sexually assaulted.
Oh, I thought
There's been so much time and stuff. They don't know if she's been in. I think the assumption has always been that it is, but I don't want to get into that assumption, especially when we get into the Jane Mixer case next week.
Right.
I don't want to go there because I think that because of this situation, I think it changes some things that I don't want to sit there and go, we know for sure. We don't.
Right.
Okay.
What I did want to highlight, though, was that she was also strangled with her miniskirt or whatever was up around her neck and be.
Yeah. There's a violence, and anybody that will watch this, if you're watching this episode, especially your people that I know are watching it all, but they're not familiar with this. And again, all the links with all the books will be in there like it always is. You're going to have all these links if you want to go down there and check stuff out. We're going to do it. The violence and just the raw aggressiveness is so real on this one. As a matter of fact, I've said it before. If this came at a different time, Vietnam wasn't going on. Charles Manson didn't happen. Just watched a movie with Sharon Tate, and the first thing I think of is, Charles Manson. If you don't have these other cultural, sociological things happening, I believe this case would be a huge case, and people would be talking about it forever. And he's still alive, John Norman Collins. Okay, so this case would actually have wings. There's a reason it doesn't, and that's, I just said it, but the brutality is real. Okay, and I think that you have to keep that in mind. There is a frenzy going on with him.
But what I wanted to also raise, and this is just to tee up the Mixer case, because when I say they, I mean law enforcement, when they eventually convict Gary Leiterman of the Mixer issue, is they're saying, hey, this next murder is totally different. There's no similarities or very few similarities. All right. Well, and I just wanted to start with what is similar with the first two. One, they're both EMU students, so they're co-eds. Jane Mixer's a co-ed, different law and different school, but co-ed nonetheless.
Right.
The first victim really wasn't looking for a ride, but she got picked up. The second victim was definitely looking for a ride and definitely was picked up, according to eyewitness testimony.
Yes.
And Jane Mixer was looking for a ride and picked up. So at least there's that similarity for the coming attraction of the Jane Mixer issue.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you something, and I don't want to get lost, and I'm looking up to make sure I give them more. I think what we're going to find, and we can fade into Mixer some. This is so different, actually, and I want to make sure I get her name right. Dawn Bazem. And she is the youngest of them all. She's 150 yards from her house.
And 13 years old.
And 13 years old. Let me explain something to you. There's any that's different. See, here's what's magical, and this is why I don't want to get lost in speculation. But as we get ready to go into Mixer, we're going to have to go into Gary. And then after we go into Gary a little bit, we're going to finish up with all the other victims. And then we are going to come back to John Norman Collins and to Gary. Okay,
Yeah,
so this series is going to last a little bit. Okay, because I want to give each person, I want to blow anybody off. But the Don person, this is what always surprises me, because sometimes I think people want to see something. In other words, because I don't want to get lost on Gary yet, because you want to make sure it's Gary, you find the differences. But here's the problem. Every one of these has something different. But if you were really going to go to different land, okay? The 13-year-old girl, Dawn, that's the difference. She's not looking for a ride. There is no allegation of a ride. There is no ride involved. She is 150 yards from her house. She can see.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a football field and a half. That's a long field goal and a long pass, but you can see your house.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the one that's incredibly different. I don't want to go too far into that, but I do want to start setting these scenarios up, especially as we get ready to close this chapter with Michelle and go into the Jane Mixer case.
Yeah.
I think that people sometimes see what they want to see.
Yeah.
And we have to be careful of that. Everybody has to be careful. That's a human nature kind of thing. Okay. But I think every one of these cases has some differences. I'm going to go into a couple here real soon. And I want to make sure I get names right so everybody's spared with. I love technology, but technology don't always love me. Okay. I'm going to tell you something. The Mary Skeleton case was correction. That's Marilyn Skeleton, right?
Skeleton, yeah.
Skeleton afterwards. And I'm trying real hard to get everybody's name correct. And I'm not a great pronouncer sometimes, so I have to work on that. But I don't want to ever show any disrespect. That's what this is really about. But the skeleton case is an incredibly different case and has more moving parts than any of them. Okay. If you get into trying to pick things out like, oh, that's like and that's not like, be very, very careful because every case has its own life.
Yeah.
Okay. Every case has its own life. And since he's picking people up in public, you have multiple, variations of what's happening because there's just multiple things going. So we don't want to get lost into that too much, but I think that was one of the things for people who wanted to think Gary, did it. And, we're going to be honest with you. We're going to lay it out. Gary, Gary has passed on, but you have dealt with his family, this situation. We don't want to get lost in him right now, but there is a lot going on in that case with a lot of moving parts. And just to say this case is so different is just not something I'm comfortable with. They're all different.
Yeah, Jane Mixer's body is found in a different jurisdiction also. So I mean, that would be first three murders, three different jurisdictions. And the movie that you like, Mr. Brooks or whatever, with Kevin Costner in it, what does he say as a serial killer?
Because they were calling him the thumbprint killer, and when he's getting ready to bury somebody who's a witness, he informs him that he's been many different killers.
There we go.
Many different names.
So they evolve, these serial killers, they evolve into different things because they're just learning. And I mean, I suspect, and this is just my own speculation, that John Norman Collins or whoever the actual killer is has killed prior to 1968, or at least had been progressively advancing in their criminality, heading towards a serial killing, because I don't think they just wake up and stab somebody 30 times or whatever they did.
And I kind of want to tie this one up and kind of bring us into our closure on saying this about the differences, right? Not the differences. Ted Bundy, everybody knows that, and they know he's out there and he's going around with a broken arm, getting women to get in his car, and he rapes and kills them. Matter of fact, he did twice at one day in a beach. Okay. He then goes to Florida and attacks co-eds in their sorority house.
Yep.
Okay, there's no correlation there. Okay, it's just he's a murderer.
Yeah. And
I think that I think everybody, and again, I think we all have to be careful because I think it's a human nature thing. Okay? Don't become a profile. Don't become I'm going to guess what he's going to do because he always does the same thing. Stop. That's not the way it works. Okay. And I think there's nothing wrong with profiling. It's help, but it's a tool. All it is. Profilers are a tool, nothing more, nothing less. And I'm not going to get onto that because I have my personal opinion. We're not here for it. Yeah. When we finish this, I'll give a 3-hour opinion of that. That doesn't fit into anything you watch on Netflix. Okay, just going to leave that at that. Okay, so at the end of the day, I think we have to be careful. Don't become profilers. We want to really look at solid evidence. We want to look at the fact that he knew people. That's not profiling. He knew these people. We're comfortable with that. Okay? That and the variations are not as much as you think. And especially when we get ready to segue into Mixer, she's another person whose biggest mistake is she's looking for a ride.
Exactly that.
And again, we've said this issue after issue. We've said this episode after episode. we're not here to judge whether or not they made a mistake. We're not there for that.
Right.
So look, anything else you want to add on this one? Everything's going to be down in the bottom. Hit like, make a comment, share with you if you have questions. If you go, hey, look, what about this? We're here. We'll come in and answer that for you.
Only I had reread the section in this Earl James book about the red car, Arnie Davis, and the third mystery person that was
Mystery person. Yeah.
And we had gone through the 3 different scenarios that Earl James had put in his book. Okay. And this is after, or a good chunk after this murder, because he is interviewing people in August of 69 and beyond and preparing a trial book to try John Norman Collins. So he's re-interviewing all these different people. So in it, specifically, it says that Arnie Davis and his brother evidently had a car with a black top. Okay. I didn't catch that the last time. I was thinking fraternity brother. Okay. Not, and maybe in this book that was not edited, maybe it is fraternity brother that's in that car with him. Yeah. But
I want to encourage anybody, because this is kind of a postscript show, and I know people that are watching the other ones that we don't want to duplicate all the information.
Right.
You need to watch the other show. If this is the first one, you got to watch the other show. It's just got a lot more detail. This was just kind of clarifying it and getting ready to go to the next.
Yeah. So they used, and what else was in here was they used the polygraph a lot to clear people back then. And I don't know, in my practice of law, the polygraph has very little or no use other than as an investigative tool. They don't clear people these days with a polygraph.
It's a tool.
It's a tool that the police use to basically try to get somebody to confess. That's been because I get people to pass the polygraph, and the police and the prosecutors go, "Oh, that's nice. We're still proceeding with our process." Yeah. And unfortunately, it's not admissible.
Yeah, the polygraph has a lot of problems and a lot of good things with it too. But
they do, but they use that a lot. Because in Earl James' book, he says they cleared 23 people. Well, I don't know who the hell they're clearing, but okay. But I wanted to tie that up with that, and then just to tee up for next week that we are going to be heading into the Jane Mixer case, who Gary Leiterman was convicted of in about 04, 05.
The next couple of episodes are going to be very important with this, and then we are going to circle back with them, because that is going to be the ending crux of it. And John Norman Collins, what he's doing today,
right? Because
as of now, he's still
alive. He's actually in the same prison, I believe, now as what Gary Leiterman was in before he died.
Yes, there you go. Okay, everybody, again, hit like. You got any comments, got any questions, feel free to ask. We'll be glad to do it. But right now, we're going to close this one up, and we're going to go into next week when we go into Jane Mixer. So we appreciate you. Follow us. Look at our stuff. We appreciate it. And we thank you. And until next time, goodbye and
see ya.